Good afternoon and welcome to this week's BizSmart Webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge on key business topics and specialist areas. Joining me today is BizSmart founder Kevin Brent. Before we start today's webinar, can I ask you to use the question mark function on your screen to post any questions that you may have for Kevin, and he will answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for joining us on this dismal Monday afternoon after a wonderful weekend. This webinar is a fundamental webinar in the BizSmart series, and it's about building a business for value, about building a valuable business. That doesn't mean building a business to sell. It means building it for value, because building a business for the principles of value will give you options. Probably the fundamental reason that you've started your business, certainly many business owners I speak to, when they started their business, they wanted freedom. They wanted freedom from having a boss telling them what they should do. They wanted to be able to do things their own way, perhaps choose the people who they worked with, the kind of work that they did, but also get a little bit more control over their life, whether it be work-life balance or whether ideally financial freedom. So, but a lot of it comes down to freedom. But what actually tends to happen, most of us get caught in something many of you have probably heard me already refer to as the owner's trap. And this fundamentally comes down to the fact that most of us, when we start a business, it's just us, and we're the ones that do the selling. We start to work with a couple of clients, and we maybe say, cool, can you do this as well? So we start to extend what we do, so we start offering more things. When we start to do that, even if we do actually end up getting other people on board, it's quite possible that we're the only ones that really can deliver those things, and we're the ones delivering and interfacing with the customer, so the customer comes back to us all the time for more things, and it comes full circle in that we then end up doing the selling again. So we're caught in that trap where basically all of the business, all the decisions come through us as the owner, and it's very difficult to build a valuable business when you do that. And typical signs, even if you've got a few people working for you, typical signs that you fall into this trap are that if you disappear off on holiday, things slow down or stop. All of your customers keep coming to you when there are problems. They don't go to somebody else within your business, and potentially also your business has reached a plateau. Your growth has stopped. So those are some of the signs that you might be either falling into or have fallen into that owner's trap. And businesses that are stuck in that trap are more stressful to run, and they're also probably worthless. And that might sound a bit blunt, but if all the business is reliant on one of us as the individual, then nobody's likely to buy a company that's dependent on the owner in that way. So that's why it's so important to build a valuable business that could be sold if that was what was wished and if the timing was right. But as I say, it is not about selling a business, about building a business that is valuable. So if your business is sellable, then it's not going to be dependent on you, which means that you can scale. It means that you could sell if you wanted to. It means that you could pass the business down to somebody else, or you could simply just step back from the day-to-day activities and take on more of a chairman type role. So it gives you options, basically. So what actually drives the value of a business? And I've been doing some work with a friend of mine, a chap called John Warrilow, who's the author of a book called Built to Sell. And he's derived that there are 8 key drivers to value of business. And this is similar to some of the stuff that we've done in BizSmart before. Now, this has been tested on something like 14,000 businesses, and he has a scale, a score, effectively that we can rate businesses on and start to assess the value. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each of these drivers in turn and explain what they are. What I'm not going to be able to do in a 20-minute webinar is to go into huge amount of depth on each one of these. So if anybody's interested in knowing a bit more, then you can contact me through the website, or those of you that have got my email address, contact me directly, and we can talk about them. But basically, there are eight key drivers of value. The first is the financial importance, financial performance, and of course that is extremely important. What people are buying, or if they're valuing a business, then they're buying the future stream of cash. So it's the cash flows of that business. So, and that's interesting because it gives us a couple of levers. A couple of things that drive that future stream of cash is how much money how much cash your business will make in the future, and how reliable are your estimates. So they're looking at how much it's likely to generate over the next few years, and then they're discounting that, or discounting those cash flows depending on how risky they think it's likely to happen. So it may sound complicated, but it's no different from if if I said to you, do you want £100 now or £100 at the end of the month? You'd probably take the money now. What if I said, do you want £100 now or £150 at the end of the month? Well, you might make a different decision, because you judge that on whether you thought I was trustworthy and whether I'm likely to come up with £150 at the end of the month, or whether I'm just going to disappear off, or whatever else. But you make your own assessment on that. And in fact, if I was a major bank, you may or may not think that was more trustworthy than me. So you might apply a different risk rate effectively on that. Now, likewise, a potential buyer will do the same. So they will look at your historical financial figures, and they'll look at the net profit, and they'll adjust it for whether or not you're paying yourself the right amount of salary, or if they had to put a manager in place instead of you, or whatever else. But they'll look at the historical to give them an idea of credibility. So if you've grown at 20% every month or something, every year for the last 5 years, and you're saying you're going to grow at another 20% every year moving forwards, they're much more likely to believe that than if you haven't. But they'll also look at at other factors on the risk side. So the future stream of cash is one of the key things in terms of the way that they will value your business. I've already mentioned growth, and that is one of the second aspects here. So one of the things that drives up your company's value is your potential to scale and to grow in the future. Now, on one of my previous webinars, I've talked about having to be able to scale a product. It's got to be valuable in the first place. You've got to have a differentiation from that people are going to be prepared to pay for, and have it as decide it's valuable. It's got to be something that is ideally repeatable, so it's not a one-off type thing, and it's got to be teachable too, because if you can't show other people in your organization how to deliver that product or service, then you're not going to be able to scale it beyond the number of hours in the day that you can do it. So growth potential is partly about that trifecta, a scale of the teachable, valuable, and repeatable. And what tends to happen over time is that many business owners find themselves broadening the list of products and services that they sell. So they're selling lots of things to a relatively small number of customers, and that's a recipe for the business becoming dependent on the owner. So actually, the thing we want to try and do here is to turn that around and focus on a smaller number of things, so sell a fewer number of things to a larger number of people. And from a growth potential point of view, that's one of the key things. But if you can demonstrate that you can do that there are other markets that you can go into and all that kind of type of thing, then obviously growth potential is a key part of valuing business. So when you're building a business, we need to be looking at that. The next is something called the Switzerland structure, and this is simply based on the fact that the Swiss are independent. They are not they're not reliant on any one other country in particular. They keep themselves on their own. And actually, from a business point of view, what that means is that you want to make sure that your business is independent or insulated really from any one customer, employee, or supplier. So from a customer perspective, your goal should be that no one customer makes up more than 15% of your revenue, for example. So if you're in that situation where you've got a particularly big customer, clearly that is a risky situation. So when we come back to what a potential acquirer is going to look at, they're going to apply more risk to that, because there's a lot of risk in that one customer if that customer decides to go. Equally, if you're reliant on one or two major suppliers, then again, that's another risky area. It might be that even if the suppliers just put a bit of a squeeze on you, or obviously if one of the suppliers refuses to deal with you or goes bust or whatever else, then you're in problem. You're in trouble. And then the other one, and this is often the harder one, is to make sure that you're not over-reliant on one or two key employees, because again, as we grow and before we've got particularly large, we're putting quite a lot of trust in probably one or two key people, and of course if they leave or for whatever reason they can't work, then that potentially is going to cause us a problem as well. So those things together help to minimize the risk. If we're reducing our reliance on any one of those, our dependence on any one of those, they help reduce the risk and therefore increase the value of our business, as well as making a business that, if we can build a business that is easier for us to run, much less likely to have ups and downs. So the fourth of these drivers is something called the valuation seesaw, and this is a bit hard to get your head around, but again, from a value point of view, if somebody is looking at buying a business, then they need to write, they come up with a sum of money. They're going to write two checks. They're going to run one. They're going to decide what the value of your business is worth, and then one of those checks goes to you, and the other check goes to fund the working capital of the business. So if you've got a business where there's a lot of working capital needs, and it needs a lot of cash up front, then the value that's going to come back out to you is reduced. But equally, whether you're selling or not, if you're running a business like that, then if you've got the cash flows around the wrong way, and the faster you grow, and the less likely you are to have cash at the end of the business if you've got strong working capital needs. So there's a lot of things around there that can be done, but clearly invoicing, trying to invoice up front as much as you can, have people on regular contracts and all that sort of type thing is key to this one. So and basically the value of your business moves in as we said, they're valuing the cash flow. So if working capital is sucking up your cash flow, then the value of your business is going down. So it works in the opposite direction. That's why it's kind of this seesaw type effect. So improving your cash flow not only increases the value of your company, but it makes it a lot less stressful to run. So what we're trying to work on here is getting the customers' money sooner and slowing the speed at which we pay out to vendors. So the next one on these is, the next value driver is all about recurring revenue. And we've spoken about this quite a lot within BizSmart. And going back to that cash flow again, that stream of cash, the more reliable that we can make our business model, then the more valuable that company is going to be and the less stressful it is to run. And the best way of doing that is to create some form of subscription model. And although that may be difficult and you may be thinking, hang on, that wouldn't work in my particular sector, it is possible to create a subscription model in pretty much any industry, but certainly an element of recurring revenue, so that you're not starting from scratch every time and selling, customizing to a new customer each time. So if you think about a manufacturing business, it makes a lot of sense. You do your prototyping, you do your research, you build your prototype, you test it, you start to set up machinery, and then once you've got it all working, you just turn that handle and you churn out them by the thousand, but or even the millions. But in a service type industry, we tend to work with a customer and we tend to do something different each time, because the customer says, can you do this, can you do that? So we believe that we have to respond to the customer needs. So we're almost developing and prototyping every time we work with the customer. So it's much harder to actually get a reliable cash flow. So if we can find a way of getting a subscription model or getting a recurring revenue type model, then it makes the business much more stable. And there are lots of different models. And in fact, what I'll probably do is for a future webinar is I'll dedicate a whole webinar to those kind of models. Because remember, they range from things like private VIP type subscription models through to things that just simplify type models and all sorts. But we'll go through those another time. So another one of these other drivers is the monopoly control. And this is the element to how well your product or service is differentiated from everybody else. So we talked about that in the value side of that, but differentiation is a combination of is it different, but do the customers care about that? So key thing here is to really work on making sure that we've differentiated that product as much as possible from whatever else is out there, what our competition is, but in a way that we know our customers care, and by that means really, will they pay for that? The fact that we run around in yellow vans, will somebody pay for that? Probably not very much. But if we can build things that we know that are very differentiated in a way that customers will pay for, that means that we should either be able to sell at a higher price than other people, or if we wish to keep it at the same price as other people, our competitors, then perhaps we would gain volume share. So a business that somebody's going to value and pay for is going to be very differentiated, have a very differentiated offer. Obviously, from running our own business, if we're not going to sell, the more differentiated we are, the more likely we are that we're going to keep getting business coming back to us, and we're not going to get swallowed up into a commodity type market. The seventh driver is all about customer satisfaction. Sounds like common sense, but it's not just about having customers that say, yeah, I quite like your product, or I'll give you a 7 out of 10, or whatever it is. The goal here is to have customers who are not only happy, but they're also willing to repurchase, and most importantly, they're willing to refer to other people. And a lot of us build businesses on a referral type model. So this is about creating raving fans, is another way of putting it, where people are so impressed with your product, service, your offering, that they'll tell other people about it. And we've heard before about the Net Promoter Score, and the chap called Fred Reichelt developed that score, and it's all about how likely are you to recommend our service to a friend or colleague, and that's a really good thing to track over time and to build that score. And businesses with a higher Net Promoter Score are again much more valuable, but also clearly if you're creating raving loyal fans that are referring, then just from your own point of view, you've got a business which is much more likely to grow. And the last of these value drivers is what's called the hub and spoke. And it's arguably the most important, and we sort of started at the beginning almost with the owner's trap. But this is the extent to which your business relies on you personally. So if you are at the center, if you're at the hub of everything, then it's going to be very restrictive. And the name for this just simply comes from the airlines industry reliance on hub airports, which is an efficient way to move planes around the globe until the hub gets snowed in, and then the whole system breaks down. And that's the principle here. So, and you can build a business with you at the hub, and you can build a profitable business like that. But you may well end up making different decisions based on whether you're trying to build a profitable business or a valuable business in the short term. Because if you're small and you're selling and you're doing a lot of the selling yourself, the owner seeking to maximize the profits of that business might well say, well, I'm not going to hire a salesperson because that's extra cost. I can sell stuff myself, so I'll do that. So I can maximize my profits in the short term by doing that. But if I'm looking long term and I'm looking about building value, I might well then start to think about, hang on a minute, what I really need to do is I need to think about getting in the salespeople, the salesperson that is going to start to do that. We need to train them up. And yes, in the short term, it's going to cost me a little bit of money, but then I know that I'm taken out of that hub and that therefore this business, to an extent, will keep going and keep growing without me. So to build a valuable business, and again, one that's less stressful, you need to find ways to start to take yourself out of the hub. Now, I'm not saying any of these are easy to do, but these are the kind of principles that we need to start thinking about. So just starting to wrap that up a little bit, most of us started our business from the point of view of freedom. We're trying to build something that on our terms, rather than that where we're dictated to. Otherwise, really, all we've done is we've transferred one job for another and probably ended up paying ourselves less in the meantime. So, a lot of it is about freedom. Most of us fall short of that dream, and we can become trapped in that business. And as I've proposed really here, the ultimate goal of any business owner, all of us, should be to build a valuable business. And that means sellable, but it doesn't mean that you have to be thinking about selling. It just simply means that we're building it on those principles, so that if we wanted to sell it, we could. If we wanted to step back a little bit from it, we could. If we wanted the management team to run it for us or hand it down to our children, then we could. So that's really just a quick overview, as I say, about the principles of building for value. If you want to know more about building for value, then you can go to the website. There's a section there about value. There's even if you want to find out a score as to how you rate on a scale up to 100, based on those 14,000 businesses that have been through that, then we can end up sending you a link to do your own assessment, and you'll find out how you rate on that. And there's a lot of evidence to show that if you can take your score up to over 80 out of 100, then you've got a very stable business, which is probably going to sell for something like 70% more than a business that is below that level of 80. So in terms of value, that's there. So that's basically all I wanted to cover today. So let's see if there's any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Kieran, thank you. Right, you've got a couple of questions coming through. The first one is from Jane, and she asks, this all sounds great, thank you, but where do I start? Are there any drivers of value more important than others?
Okay, good question. So, we talked probably at the end of one of the most important, I think, is the owner's trap side of things, the hub and spoke. So trying to reduce the reliance of the business on you as an individual. But the value builder score, it's probably as good a place to start as any. So find that link, get in contact with us, work out what your score is, and as part of that, you'll be able to see whether there are particular drivers of your business that you need to work and improve on. For me, most of the business I work with, a lot of what we're trying to do, and I think makes the biggest difference, is trying to find that scalable product or service. Remember I talked about TVR, the teachable, valuable and repeatable, and there's more on that actually in the webinar called I think it's called Regaining Confidence in your business model, and there's more on that in there, and it is key to a lot of businesses that we work with, and that links in with the recurring revenue. So the scalable product linked in with something that provides an element of recurring revenue stream, for me, are probably about the most important things on the value drivers. So thanks for that, Jane.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question from Graham. How do I estimate what my business is worth?
Oh, well, there's a topic for more than a 20-minute webinar, and it's definitely on its own. There's lots of different ways of valuing. So we talked about discounted cash flow, which is net present value, but rule of thumb is the average business will sell for something like 3 to 4 times its net profit, and that's its adjusted net profit. So if you haven't paid yourself a salary and you recorded a net profit without your salary in it, and it would need somebody paid a lot more than you paid, then you need to put that in before you start on net profit. Or equally, if you're fortunate enough to have paid yourself a huge salary, but in fact if you employed a manager to do it, you could pay them a third of the amount, then you can adjust your profit accordingly. So if you've got that net profit figure, typically multiplying by 3 or 4 is a rough idea of what the value of business might be, with a caveat of everything that we've just said. If that business is totally reliant on you, it might on paper have a value of 3 to 4 times, but it will probably never ever actually realize that. Whereas equally, if you build the value according to some of these principles, then multiples of over 8, 9, 10 have been reported. But those are a starting point. They're rules of thumb, because most people, when they get serious with it, will actually do some kind of discounted cash flow type analysis.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Mike. How do I go about taking myself out of the hub?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Straight to one of the hardest ones of the lot, I think. There's no easy answer to that, but you really want to start thinking from right now about how reliant is this business on me, and what do I have to do, and ideally what could somebody else do. And even if your business can afford to do it, and you can afford to get somebody else to do some of the things that aren't really adding huge value to your business, then you need to look at that. So you need to look at what's taking up your time within the business, and thinking about what things could either be outsourced or could be done by another employee. And does it have to be you that has all those that has that input in every bit, or can you start to take a step back from it? So when you're making a decision about the next step in your growth, think about actually, it might not make the most profit for the moment, but actually if we make this work, would it be better if I move some of that workload to somebody else, to employ somebody to do it, or to outsource it, or to do it? But it's you've got to start thinking about it and asking yourself that question every time. And what are we trying to achieve? So I mean, the extreme of that is consultancy. If you're working as an independent contractor consultant, and that's all you're doing, it's just you, it's totally reliant on you. You might make a lot of money by being a consultant, but you couldn't sell that. You couldn't sell that business. So if you really wanted to build a business that would have value, that could be sustainable in the long term, and not insulated from you being sick and all that sort of stuff, even at that level, you've got to start to think: is there somebody else who could do some elements of this business?
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Another question. Carol asks, can you tell me more about the Net Promoter Score, please?
Yeah, I can. I think probably the best thing, actually, that Jill Hutchinson did a great webinar a few weeks ago called Word of Mouth Marketing, in which she covered that in quite some depth. So probably the best thing is to have a look at that. But it's a very well respected score. It's used by global industries to track how well they're doing, and it's been shown to have a direct influence or a direct relationship between your Net Promoter Score and your growth rate. And it comes down to that one simple question, which is how likely, on a scale of 1 to 10, but Jill talks about a scale of 1 to 5, and some people use a 1 to 5, but normally on a 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our company or our products and services to colleagues or friends? And the bit that makes it net as opposed to promoter score is it works on the principle that people that score you 9s and 10s are probably the people that are going to go out and actually actively promote your business. They're prepared to refer and all that kind of stuff. People that score you sort of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or whatever else are detractors, and they'll probably actually, maybe even 6s, they'll actually take away from that. Whereas the people in between, the 6, 7s, 8s, or the 7s and 8s, although it might look good, you might say, oh yeah, I've got lots of 7s and 8s, they're not really, they're just thinking your service is fine. You know, they're not great. They're not going to go out and hugely recommend. So you discount those. So you basically take away the number of detractors from the number of promoters, and that ends up being your net. And if you track that score over time, you can, and in some industries you can even compare it to an industry average, but certainly you want that score to be as high as possible. And it's a really, really good indicator of how satisfied your customers are and how loyal they are and likely to refer, and therefore how likely you are to be able to grow your business on a particular referral type basis.
Great, thank you. Right, you've got another question from Philip. Should the recurring revenue stream be in line with your main service offer, or can it be something different?
Well, in an ideal world, given that a lot of what we've Thanks, Philip, for that. A lot of what we've spoken about before, and a lot of what BizSmart is trying to get. The thing that we find business owners struggle with a lot is focus. So ideally, we should be having our core purpose, and our core offers and services should be in line with that. So it depends exactly what you mean here, Philip. If you think about doing something that's totally wacky and way out from your core business, then I would be saying, well, maybe that needs to be a different business, and if it's really something that you can do, maybe you should be doing that instead of the other business. But so it really should be in line with certainly your main offerings, would be my view. But if you've got a specific idea in mind, let's have a chat offline, Philip.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions coming through at the moment. Thank you, Kevin, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of Kevin's presentation and his contact details out to you all very shortly, so please do email him if you have any further questions. Just to say thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you make our webinars a regular slot in your calendar. And Kevin and I hope you have a great evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much.